I found out my wife had been sleeping with another soldier from my own unit 6 days after I got home from a 9-month deployment, and I found out completely by accident, standing in my own kitchen, waiting for a printer to spit out a form. 9 years married, 11 together. 2 kids asleep upstairs who'd drawn me a banner out of printer paper and crayon that was still taped crooked over the garage door. Every single night of that deployment, lying on a cot in a plywood room that smelled like dust and diesel, I'd built this house in my head as the place I was fighting to get back to. The whole house, not just her, but she was the center of it, if I'm honest, the way she always had been. I didn't say a word to her that night. I want to be exact about that, because the version of this story people assume happened isn't what happened. I didn't yell. I didn't wake the kids. I closed the laptop, slow, the same way you'd close a door on a room you didn't want anyone to know you'd been in, and I walked outside into the backyard in the dark, and I stood there in the cold with my arms crossed until I'd worked out exactly how I wanted the next few weeks to go. Because I already knew, standing there, maybe 4 minutes after I'd read enough to understand what I was looking at, that whatever I did in the first 10 minutes of finding out wasn't going to be the smart version. I needed a version that came later. I'll call her Danielle. I'll call him Brandon. Those aren't their real names, but every guy I served with will know exactly who I mean when I say them. I want to walk you through this slowly, because that's the only way it makes sense, not as one bad night, but as 9 months of a life happening on the other side of a screen while I wasn't there to see any of it in real time. Picture a gymnasium. Folding chairs stacked against one wall, a paper banner strung across the basketball hoops that said, "Welcome home 3RD Battalion," in letters someone's kid had clearly helped cut out, and about 250 people packed behind a strip of yellow tape, because that's as close as they're allowed to stand until the doors at the far end open. I remember the specific smell of that gym, floor wax, and cold coffee from an urn somebody's family readiness group volunteer had set up on a folding table. I remember a country song playing over a speaker system that kept cutting out. I remember my hands were shaking slightly when we filed in, all of us in our dress uniforms, duffel bags slung over one shoulder, and I remember scanning that crowd of faces for hers the way you'd scan a horizon for a single light. I found her fast. She's easy to find in a crowd. 5'9", dark hair. She was wearing a green dress I remembered her wearing on our 5th anniversary. Eli was next to her, holding a sign he'd made, and Sadie was on her hip, 4 years old, too young to fully understand what deployment meant, beyond Daddy being gone a long time, and now not being gone. Here's the detail I didn't let myself see clearly until much later, replaying it. Danielle wasn't crying. Every other spouse in that gymnasium was crying. The woman 2 families down from us was on her knees on the gym floor, both hands over her mouth, and a guy from 2nd Platoon was holding his wife so tight her feet came half off the ground. Danielle hugged me. She did. Her arms went around my neck and she said, "You're home," into my collar, and it should have felt like the moment I'd pictured 9 months of nights lying on that cot. But her eyes went to her phone in her hand before mine had even come back down from the hug. Half a second. Less. The kind of thing that doesn't register as anything at the time, because why would it? You've just been handed your children again. You're not running an investigation. You're just trying to remember how her hair smells. I know now that half a second was her checking whether Brandon had texted asking how it went. The first 2 weeks home are always strange, even in a normal homecoming. Soldiers call it reintegration, and there are literally briefings about it, PowerPoint slides about how your kids might act different, how you might feel like a guest in your own house for a while. So I filed the strangeness under that. I filed a lot under that. She'd started a new gym routine while I was gone, 6 a.m., 3 mornings a week, a place 15 minutes from the house instead of the one on post. Made sense. Better hours, she said, since the kids' preschool didn't open until 7:30, and this way she was back before they woke up. Her phone stayed face down on counters, in a way I didn't remember it doing before. Small thing, people do that. There was a name that came up twice in the first week, always sideways, always attached to something helpful and specific. Brandon came by and fixed the fence post that blew down in that storm. Brandon helped me get the mower running again before you got back, so you wouldn't have to deal with it your first weekend home. I actually remember feeling grateful. I remember thinking, that's a good dude, whoever he is, helping a deployed guy's wife with yard work instead of just watching it fall apart. I think I said exactly that out loud to her. That's a good dude. I found out later, Brandon Pierce was a specialist in my own company. Torn ACL, 8 months into our workup, permanent physical profile, non-deployable, stayed back on rear detachment the entire 9 months. The rest of us were gone. Rear detachment does exactly what it sounds like. They're the skeleton crew that stays on post, runs the office, handles paperwork, and yes, checks in on families. It's an actual job. Somebody has to do it. Somebody had been doing a version of it I didn't understand yet. There was a woman named Maria in our family readiness group, married to a guy in my platoon, someone Danielle had gotten close to over the deployment the way spouses do. Grocery runs together, kid playdates, the two of them trading off pickup duty. I didn't think about Maria again until about 3 weeks after I got home, when I ran into her husband at the commissary and he got a strange look on his face and said, "How's everything going, man? Like, everything good at home?" in a tone that had way more underneath it than the words did. I said things were good. He nodded too fast and changed the subject to a truck he was thinking about buying. I didn't put it together that day. I want to be honest about that. I put it together 6 days after I got home, standing at my own kitchen counter, waiting on a printer. One call, replayed. There's a specific phone call from month 6 that I've gone back to more times than I can count now, turning it over the way you'd turn over a coin looking for a mint mark you missed the first 10 times. We got 20, sometimes 30 minutes a week on a satellite line that cut out if you moved your head too far from a particular spot in the plywood room, so every call mattered, every call got planned for. That week, she picked up on the 4th ring instead of the 1st, which she never did, and when her voice came on, it had a strange brightness to it, pitched slightly too high, the way people sound when they're arranging their face for a photo. I remember asking what she'd been up to, and she said, "Oh, nothing, just a long day," and laughed once, short, at nothing I'd said. In the background, faint, under her voice, I heard what I registered at the time as the television. A man's voice, low, not words I could make out, just tone and cadence. I asked if the TV was on. She said yes, some show she was half watching, and asked me a question about the weather where I was to move us off the subject, and I let her move us off it, because 20 minutes is not a lot of time, and I didn't want to spend any of it interrogating background noise. I've done the math since. 11 visits, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 10 to 1. That call happened on a Thursday, at 11:40 in the morning, her time. I'm not telling you this to torture myself in front of you. I'm telling you because this is what it actually looks like from the inside, in real time, while it's happening. Not some obvious tell you'd catch if you were paying attention, just a voice pitched half a step too high, and a television that wasn't a television, 30 minutes a week, 6 months running, and you have no way to know, none, until you're standing in your own kitchen 18 weeks later with a laptop that was never locked. Here's exactly how it happened, because the ordinariness of it is the part that still gets me. I needed to print my post-deployment medical screening form, the one every soldier fills out within 30 days of getting back. Questions about sleep and mood and whether anything happened over there you want to talk to somebody about. Our printer only worked off her laptop. She'd stepped outside to grab the mail. I remember the storm door clicking shut behind her. I remember the particular creak it makes on the hinge. And I sat down at the kitchen table and opened her laptop to pull the form off the shared drive. The screen was already unlocked. Messages app was already open in the dock, the way it always was, because she used it for everything. Grocery lists to her sister, memes to Maria, the school's pickup line group chat. A notification slid in from the top right corner while I was looking for the file. A blue bubble. A name saved simply as B. 3 words visible before it faded back out. Miss you too. I want you to understand something about the next 4 minutes, because I've had a long time to examine them, and I still don't fully know how I stayed as calm as I did. I didn't slam the laptop shut. I didn't call out to her through the window. I clicked the thread open, and I read. It went back further than that one message, much further. I scrolled, and the dates climbed backward. A month, 2 months, 4, and the specific number of that thread, when I finally made myself count 2 nights later sitting in my truck in a parking lot with a printed copy in my lap, was 1,140 messages, spanning 7 of the 9 months I'd been gone. 7 months, not a slip, not a single bad night. 7 months of a second relationship running underneath the one I thought I still had, in real time, while I was 3,000 miles away pricing out what kind of tree I wanted to plant in the backyard when I got home, because I'd told her on a call in month 4 that I wanted us to plant something that would still be growing when the kids were adults. I read 3 messages in full before I heard the storm door creak again. I'm only going to tell you one of them, because it's the one that changed something in my chest permanently, the way a bone changes once it's actually broken instead of just bruised. I know this is wrong. I do. But some nights, I actually hope he doesn't come back, and I hate myself for it, and I can't stop. I closed the laptop. I stood up. I walked past her in the kitchen doorway, said something about needing air, and I went out to the backyard, and that's where Act 1 of this story actually happened. The part I already told you. The 4 minutes, the decision. The controlled decision, once I made it standing out there in the dark, was this. I was not going to confront her that night, or that week. I was going to find out everything, completely, with proof I couldn't talk myself out of later in a weaker moment. Because I already knew myself well enough to know that somewhere in me was a version who'd want to believe an explanation, want to believe it was one bad month, and I needed to make it structurally impossible for that version of me to win. And separately, because Brandon Pierce wasn't just some guy from the gym, he was a specialist in my own company, and what he'd done wasn't only a betrayal of me, it was a violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, adultery and fraternization both, the kind of thing that ends careers when a command actually pursues it. I decided he was going to face that consequence too, not because I wanted him fired, but because I wanted every part of this handled in a way neither of them could later pretend had been an overreaction. I want to walk you through what those 2 weeks actually looked like from the inside, because I gathered evidence doesn't tell you what it costs a person to live inside a house, share a bed some nights, and a guest room others, eat dinner across a table from someone, while running what was essentially an investigation into your own marriage. I slept in the guest room starting the second night, and I told her it was still deployment sleep patterns messing with me, which she accepted without much question, because reintegration sleep problems are common enough that nobody questions them. I'd lie there most nights with my phone brightness turned all the way down, going back through the message thread in small pieces so I wouldn't have to look at all 1,140 at once, because doing it all at once the first night had put something in my chest I didn't want to feel twice. I found the pattern. Tuesdays and Thursdays mostly, between 10 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon, the hours the kids were at preschool, I found 4 separate references to him being at the house. The fence post, the mower, helped me move the dresser back after I rearranged the bedroom, which I read probably 6 times, because I remembered that dresser being in a different spot when I got home, and I'd complimented her on the new layout. I found out my next-door neighbor, a retired Air Force guy named Pete, who kept a doorbell camera pointed mostly at his own porch, but catching a slice of our driveway too, had motion-triggered footage going back 90 days. I didn't tell him why I was asking. I told him I thought a package had gone missing in the spring, and I wanted to check dates. He pulled it up on his phone right there on his porch, scrolled through thumbnails, and there was Brandon's gray Silverado, in our driveway, 11 separate times across 2.5 months, always between 10 and 1, always gone before 2. He handed me his phone so I could see it myself, full screen, and I want to describe exactly what that felt like, because I found footage doesn't capture it. The clip was silent, grainy, time-stamped in the corner in small white numbers. The truck pulls in, sits for 3 seconds, engine still running, exhaust visible in the cold air of one clip, a March morning. Then it shuts off. Brandon gets out. I recognized him instantly even in that low resolution. The specific way he ducked his head coming out of a truck cab, a habit I'd actually seen him do 100 times in a company formation area, because your brain files away small physical tics about people you've served with without ever meaning to. He walks up our driveway, not fast, not sneaking, just a guy walking up to a house, like he'd done it enough times that his body had stopped being careful about it. I stood on Pete's porch in the cold, with his phone in my hand, thumb frozen over the screen, and watched that same 11-second clip 4 times in a row before I could make myself hand the phone back. Pete didn't ask why. I think he already half knew by the look on my face, the way you know a diagnosis is bad from a doctor's expression before they say a single word of it out loud. "You want me to text you these?" he asked. Quiet. I said yes. He sent all 11 clips to my phone that night. I watched every single one of them again, alone, at my kitchen table, after Danielle had gone to bed. The same table where, 16 days later, I'd lay a folder open in front of her. I cross-referenced 4 of those dates against my own deployment log, the actual record of missions and movements I'd kept for my own after-action reports. One of those 11 dates, May the 14th, was a day my platoon had taken small arms fire during a routine movement, nothing catastrophic, nobody hit, but the kind of day that gets logged, the kind of day where for about 6 minutes back home, if she'd had any idea it was happening, she'd have been the wife of a guy in an active situation. Brandon's truck left our driveway at 1:52 that afternoon. My unit made contact at approximately 1:40, our time difference accounted for. I sat with that specific overlap longer than I sat with almost anything else in this whole story. I'm not going to tell you exactly what that did to me. I'll just say there's a particular kind of stillness that isn't calm. It just looks like it from the outside. About 10 days in, I went to see my first sergeant, not through any official process, just showed up at his house on a Saturday, because he was the kind of NCO who'd earned guys showing up at his house on a Saturday. He'd been in 22 years, divorced once himself, over almost this exact situation, a decade earlier. He didn't say much while I talked. He had his arms crossed on his porch rail, looking out at his own yard, and when I finished, he was quiet long enough that I thought maybe he hadn't heard the last part. "You want my honest read?" he finally said. I told him yes. Pierce is going to get chaptered once this hits my desk officially, and it will hit my desk, because I'm not going to sit on something like this, involving one of my own soldiers and another one of my own soldiers' wives. That part's simple. The part that isn't simple is you. You get to decide what kind of guy you're going to be walking out of this. Some guys let this turn them into somebody who's angry for the next 10 years. Some guys use it to get real clear, one time, about exactly what they will and won't accept, and then they close the book and keep living. I've seen both. I know which one I'd want for you. I didn't say much back. I remember the specific sound of his porch swing creaking, and a dog barking 2 yards over, and I remember thinking that was the first time since the laptop that I felt like I was talking to someone, instead of just carrying something alone. I want to slow all the way down for this part, because it's the part everyone listening actually wants, and it deserves to be told exactly as it happened, not summarized. It was a Tuesday night, 16 days after I'd read that first message. The kids were down, Eli asleep with his door cracked the way he liked it, Sadie's nightlight throwing that dim blue glow into the hallway. Danielle was at the kitchen table folding laundry, a basket of small socks and school clothes in front of her, and I sat down across from her with a manila folder in my hand. She looked up. I remember her face doing something specific in that first half second. Not guilt yet, Just a small confusion, because I don't usually bring paperwork to the kitchen table at 9 at night. "What's that?" she said. I opened the folder and turned it around so it faced her, and I laid the first printed page flat on the table between the laundry basket and a small folded pair of Sadie's socks with cartoon foxes on them. I watched her eyes move across it. I watched the exact moment they found the date and then the words underneath it, and I watched her face go through about 4 different things in under 3 seconds. Confusion, then recognition, then something crumpling around her mouth, then her hand coming up to cover it. Too late, because I'd already seen it uncovered. "I can explain," she said. Her voice had already broken by the second word. "You don't have to," I said. I kept my voice level, not cold. I want to be clear about that, because I've heard people describe this kind of moment as cold, and it wasn't cold. It was the opposite. It was the most controlled I have ever had to be, while feeling the least controlled I've ever felt. I already read it. 1,140 messages, 7 months, 11 times his truck was in our driveway, including the day my platoon took fire, and you had no idea, because you were with him, instead of anywhere near your phone. She was crying by then, not performing it, actually crying, the kind where your breathing goes ragged between words. "I was so scared the whole time you were gone," she said. "Every single day. I kept picturing the door, the uniforms, the 2 of them standing there. I know that's not an excuse. I know it isn't. I'm not saying it's an excuse. I just felt so alone, and he was just there, and it started so small, and then I didn't know how to stop it, and I hated myself every single time. I need you to know I hated myself." "I believe that part," I said. And I did. I still do. That's the part of this I've never pretended wasn't true. She wasn't lying about hating herself. That doesn't change what she did with 7 months while I was gone. Both things are true at the same time. I've made my peace with holding both. Are we done?" she asked. Her hands were flat on the table now, laundry forgotten, one of Sadie's little fox socks still sitting between us like it didn't belong in this conversation at all, which it didn't, and that's exactly why I remember it. "I already know the answer to that," I said. "I've known it for 16 days. I wanted you to hear it from me directly instead of finding out through a lawyer's letter. Because whatever else is true, you're still their mother, and I'm not going to make this uglier than it has to be for their sake. But yes, we're done." She didn't argue right away. She sat there with both hands pressed flat on the table, staring at the printed page like it might change if she looked at it long enough. And then she asked the question I'd been bracing for without fully admitting to myself I was bracing for it. "Are you going to report him?" "Already have," I said. "Talked to First Sergeant Reyes 10 days ago. It's already moving." Something in her face changed at that. Not anger, not yet. More like the specific look of someone realizing a door they thought was still open had already been closed behind them for over a week, while they were still standing in the room deciding whether to walk through it. "You've known for 16 days, she said, slower now. "You've been sleeping in the guest room, sitting across from me at dinner, letting me talk about normal things, the kids' school, what to make for dinner, for 16 days, and you already knew." "Yes," I said. "That feels," she started, and stopped, and started again. "That feels like you were punishing me before you ever said a word." I sat with that for a second, because I think she half believed it, and I wanted to answer it honestly, instead of just defending myself. "I wasn't punishing you," I said. "I was making sure that when I did say something, it wasn't going to be a version of me you could talk your way past, or a version of me who'd regret how he said it. You had 7 months to decide what kind of person you were going to be while I was gone. I gave myself 16 days to decide what kind of person I was going to be once I found out. I don't think those are the same thing, but I understand why, from where you're sitting, they might feel like they rhyme." She didn't have an answer for that. I don't think there was one. I think some part of her had known, the same way some part of me had known standing in that backyard 16 days earlier, that once I had a folder and not just a feeling, there wasn't a version of this where I stayed. Telling the families. I called my own parents 2 days later, sitting in my truck in the parking lot outside their church, because I couldn't make myself do it inside my own house yet. My mother went quiet on the line for so long I asked if she was still there. My father, when she handed him the phone, asked exactly one question: "Are the kids okay?" And when I said they were, as okay as 7 and 4-year-olds can be through something like this, he just said, "Then you'll get through the rest of it too. Slower than you want to, but you will." Danielle's parents were harder. Her mother called me directly, which I hadn't expected, and instead of the anger I'd braced for, she cried on the phone and apologized to me. Actual apologies, like she was somehow responsible for a decision her adult daughter made 3,000 miles from either of them. I told her she didn't need to apologize for anything. She said, "I raised her better than this," in a voice that broke in the middle of the sentence, and I didn't know what to do with that except let her say it. Brandon Pierce was called into his company commander's office 11 days after I formally reported what I had: the message logs, the time-stamped doorbell footage, the cross-referenced dates, to our command, through First Sergeant Reyes, exactly the way he said it would happen. I wasn't in the room, but I heard about it secondhand from 3 different guys within the same week, which tells you something about how fast something like that moves through a company. He was administratively separated 4 months later, other than honorable, the kind of discharge that follows a person. Before that even finalized, word had already moved through the unit the way word always does, and I watched something happen to how people treated him that I didn't have to lift a finger to cause. Guys who used to eat lunch with him started finding reasons to sit somewhere else. He stopped showing up to the gym on post at his usual hours. Someone who'd known him for years told me Brandon had said, near the end, that he didn't think it would blow up like this, as if 11 visits to another soldier's house while that soldier was taking fire overseas was ever a small thing that just happened to get big. Danielle moved into an apartment 11 minutes from the house, close enough for the custody arrangement we eventually settled on, 60-40 in my favor during the school year, closer to even in summers, a schedule we built together, calmly, in a mediator's office instead of a courtroom, because whatever she'd done, I didn't want our kids' lives run through a system built for people who couldn't talk to each other at all. We could still talk to each other, we just weren't married anymore. Maria, the FRG friend, called me about a month after everything came apart. She cried on the phone before she even got a full sentence out. She told me she'd known most of the way through and hadn't said anything because she didn't think it was her place, because Danielle had asked her not to, because she'd told herself it would end on its own before I got home. I didn't yell at her either. I just told her that "not my place" is the exact sentence that lets things like this keep happening to people who deserved to know sooner, and that I hoped she'd remember that the next time she was standing where she'd been standing. She said she would. I believe she meant it. Whether she'll actually act on it if it happens again to someone else, I don't know. Nobody ever really knows that about another person until it's tested. It's been a year and 4 months now. I have the kids Monday through Friday during the school year, Danielle has them weekends, and we've gotten better at the handoffs than I expected we would, mostly because neither of us wants Eli or Sadie carrying any more weight than they already are. Eli's 7, old enough to have asked me once, directly, why mommy doesn't live with us anymore, and I told him the truest, simple version I could find, that sometimes grown-ups make choices that mean they can't live in the same house anymore, and that it wasn't anything he or his sister did, and that both of us still loved him exactly the same amount we always had. He seemed to accept that the way 7-year-olds accept most things, fully, for about 10 minutes, and then he wanted to know if we could get pancakes. I planted that tree, the one I'd told her about on a call in month 4, the one I wanted still growing when the kids were grown. Planted it the spring after the divorce finalized, by myself, in the same backyard where I'd stood in the dark that first night working out what to do. It's about 4 feet tall now. I don't know what that means exactly, if it means anything. I just know I still wanted it in the ground. Brandon Pierce, Last I heard, moved out of state. Danielle is dating again, someone from her new job, a civilian. And from what the kids tell me, the small, unfiltered things kids report back without meaning to report anything at all, he seems like a decent guy. I hope that's true. I'm not saying that to sound generous. I'm saying it because I've found I don't actually want to be a person who needs her life to stay wrecked in order to feel like mine came out okay. Here's the part I keep coming back to, the part I'd want anyone in a similar spot to actually hear instead of skip past. 9 months overseas, and the thing that almost broke me wasn't anything that happened over there. It was 6 days home, standing at my own kitchen counter, waiting on a printer. You spend a deployment bracing for the wrong kind of danger. Nobody prepares you for the kind that's already inside the house you're fighting to get back to. If you've ever come home from somewhere hard, only to find the harder thing was waiting for you at home the whole time, hit subscribe. Drop one word in the comments if you made it all the way through this one. Printer. I read every single one.